Hey, everybody, and welcome to the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce candidate interviews for the 2022 general election. What I've done is I've taken 6 races between the 26th Legislative District and the 35th Legislative District. I'm taking the 12 candidates, 12 interviews, spliced them together to come up with 6 videos for those 6 races. I've asked all the candidates the same questions. We were fortunate enough this year to get all the candidates to participate. We've also included the Kitsap County Commissioners race, which is District 3. District 3 includes north of South Kitsap, Bremerton, up into just a little bit north of Silverdale. So it's the central Seebeck area. Even though you don't live in that area, if you live in Kitsap County, you do get to vote in that race. So I would encourage you to check out that video also. And then lastly, a word on the video production itself. I am not a professional videographer, never claimed to be. So what I've done is I've taken the 14 videos, spliced them together. There may occasionally be an awkward silence. There may be some abrupt boom, next question, things like that. I've kind of cut out any small talk and courtesies that may have taken place throughout the course of the videos. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned a little bit of something here. If you did, make sure you tell your friends about it so that they can watch and make an informed decision. But again, I want to stress, most important, vote, get your ballot in by August 8th. I understand if you get your ballots in as soon as you get them, then there is less chance of getting political junk mail. So thanks for watching and have a great day. Hey everybody, it's Chamber Matt, and this morning I am meeting with Travis Couture from, I don't know, where do you live, Travis?
Allen.
And you live in Allen, okay. So Travis is from Allen. He is running for the 35th Legislative District, position number 2. For those that aren't aware, especially here in South Kitsap, there was some redistricting done, and a larger chunk of South Kitsap and up into Seebeck of Kitsap County was redistricted and kind of shoved into the 35th, which actually covers from here all the way down to Thurston County. How far down does it go?
All the way to Rainier.
All the way to Rainier. So it is a huge legislative district.
Yeah.
And so thank you, Travis, for stepping up on this. Travis, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Perfect. Like you said, I'm Travis Couture, running for the State House in the 35th, position 2. I'm a Republican. And I am a program manager. I work for Lockheed Martin out in Kitsap County, SwiftPack, which is on Naval Base Kitsap Bangor, the submarine base. And I assist in the management of the Fleet Ballistic Missile Program, which has strategic defense assets valued a little bit over $1 billion and effort for roughly around 300 employees. I am a U.S. Navy veteran. I did serve on submarines. And now I'm running for the State House. As mentioned, I live in Allen, which is just a little bit past Belfair in Mason County. And I have 4 school-aged kids, a family of 6. And so my life is pretty busy all the time. And maybe I'm a little bit crazy for taking this on, but I'm really proud and have been honored to be passed through the primary by the voters. And I look forward to having the critical discussions on all the issues in the 35th District in Washington State.
Next question is why? Why do you want to be a state representative?
I feel like I have something to offer for my community and for the state and the district. And I have a lot of concerns about what has been happening in the legislature for some issues a long time and some issues more recently in the last handful of sessions. And, those issues cover a wide variety of things, but my campaign platform is all about our shared values in a rural district. I think rural districts like ours have been kind of left behind in Olympia. And I simply just lead with, I think people want to feel safe. They want to see their kids get a good education. They want to provide for their families, and they want to enjoy their constitutional rights and freedoms. And so that's a pretty simple message, but sometimes simple works. And I think people just want to kind of roll back towards a little bit of sanity in our state government.
Hey everybody, welcome and thank you for joining me today while I am visiting with Sandy Kaiser, who is the running for the position 2 of the 35th Legislative District. The 35th Legislative District is huge. It runs from, I guess, like Western Thurston County up through Mason County and touches kind of south and west Kitsap up into the Seebeck area a little bit. So it is huge. I've been told that it's about the size of Rhode Island. So you are the representative for a state almost. So thank you for joining me today. And I've just got a series of questions real quick, and we're gonna. First off, I'm going to ask you the really tough question first, Sandy. I guess tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to run for or why you want to be the state representative.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Matt. And thank you to the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce for this great invite. I'm Sandy Kaiser. I am a fourth generation Western Washingtonian, descended from loggers and farmers. And I live in rural Thurston County, right on the border with Mason County on Totten Inlet. I'm seeking this position because I believe our kids in our rural community should have the same opportunities for success and good quality of life as folks do in urban parts of our state. The 35th is a really rural district. If you look at it, I think our biggest incorporated town is Shelton. Most of us are actually on septic systems rather than sewers. We drink our water from wells. And that's one thing we have in common, even though it is a huge district. But one thing we know for sure is that we really need to improve our schools, create better conditions for local business to thrive and grow, create more family wage jobs, and expand our infrastructure. So important, whether it's broadband, whether it's roads. I had a great conversation a couple of days ago with current State Senator Tim Sheldon. And Tim Sheldon shows what it's like to be a rural local Democrat focused on the issues in our community and how important it is to make sure we have a business-friendly environment. So I believe that I understand our district's special rural qualities and needs. I have an extensive background in public service. I served our nation for 25 years as a foreign service officer, as an American diplomat. And what I did overseas was basically advocate for American trade, peace, and security. I then came back to Washington State, where I served as communications director for the Washington State Department of Natural Resources. And I got a really good look at the natural resources challenges and opportunities on our landscape. I am a very strong supporter of sustainable logging and the shellfish industry in our region, so incredibly important to jobs and to our even identity, I would say. I'm enjoying some strong support from those communities, including Taylor Shellfish Farms, the Squaxin Island Tribe, which is the largest employer in Mason County. I'm also really deeply concerned about our environment in general. I currently serve as a vice president of the board of the Capital Land Trust, which does a lot of wonderful work to promote working forests and farms, as well as conserve some really vital habitat. We have a great opportunity with this seat to really get some stuff done in the legislature. I am a Democrat. I would call myself a common sense Democrat, really focused on our rural issues. And the reality is if you have a seat at the table with the majority caucus, you can really get a lot done for our community. So I'm excited to be running and look forward to more of your questions.
Thank you, Sandy. So the first question I've got is, One of the biggest challenges facing businesses owners today is the rising costs of doing business. Now, that might be fuel prices, it's just inflation in general, rising labor costs, supply chain backlogs, regulations from government, whether it's the county, state, city, federal. And then, of course, there's our favorite, the taxes. They pay B&O taxes, employment taxes, payroll taxes, all those other taxes. So I guess, so with that said, the question is, what role does government play in helping small businesses keep their costs down?
I think you've got a universe of topics in that one question, and I'll try to deal with a few of them. I do agree that we really need to take a look at our current tax system. I really want to make sure that B&O taxes in particular, that we really take a look at the way that they're administered. There's a lot of folks that are paying a lot in B&O taxes, and yet there are others that aren't. And what we have, I think, is a system that's grown over time, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think it's really time to take a good look at the whole system together and make sure we're not unduly penalizing businesses, or especially manufacturers that might want to locate to our amazing region, and make sure that working families and limited income seniors are not carrying a disproportionate share of the tax burden. Right now, because we have the way we do it with our B&O taxes and our consumption taxes, it seems that it's an unfair system. I have a friend who works in state government who's described to me all the incredible loopholes that do exist in B&O, but then how many sectors of the economy are paying really high amounts. So that's just one area of possibility, I think, for the legislature to make it easier on folks, not only when they're buying products, but when they're interested in expanding their businesses.
All right, cool. So as kind of a follow-up for that, is there anything specifically that you would support to keep costs down for businesses?
I think, of course, labor costs we know are a really big factor there for businesses. I think the state should be looking at ways to reduce the complexity for businesses that have to navigate patchwork of regulations at the local level. So to be able to kind of establish some guidelines for local jurisdictions that would reduce the regulatory burden that exists right now for small and local businesses, especially folks that are just coming out of the pandemic, that are still struggling. I mean, I want to protect workers. We need laws that protect them, but we also need to make sure that we're not creating such dense webs of regulation that these businesses can't thrive. So that's where I see an opportunity for some leadership from the legislature.
All right. So the last part of this question, like I say, when I say I got half a dozen questions, it's like a half a dozen plus a few follow-ups. I want to talk real quick about the enormous budget surplus that's currently on the books for Washington State. Do you support any type of tax relief efforts for local businesses? And if so, I mean, outside of removing loopholes, the thing is with removing loopholes is it's necessarily not going to reduce anybody's tax burden. It may increase the tax burden of those businesses whose loopholes are removed. So, what can you see, or what tax relief would you support?
I think tax relief is something that we really should consider, and I would have hoped that we could have considered it even earlier, whether it's a gas tax holiday or other types of tax relief. We are very fortunate to have that surplus. I'm sure there's no shortage of wise ways we could deploy it, but I think that particular idea is really worth exploring. I would love to see that again, because I do think that right now in our state, there are parts of our community that are bearing a disproportionate share of tax burden, and especially since we rely on consumption taxes that affect low-income people much more severely than folks who are making a lot more money. So yeah, I would want to take a look at all those possibilities and look for ways to get more money back into the pockets of folks.
One of the biggest challenges facing small businesses or business owners in general today is the rising cost of doing business. These costs include the rising fuel prices, inflation, rising labor costs, supply chain backlogs, regulations on, can and you can't do this, or, regulations to do with heating. And we got taxes, unemployment taxes, B&O taxes, payroll taxes, this tax, that tax, property tax. First part of that question is, what role does government play in helping small businesses keep their costs down?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to go back just a second to the fact that the legislature had, like almost a $15 billion surplus during a pandemic, and they spent it all kind of like what I call is like drunken sailors. And we didn't really get anything in return for it. And what I would have liked to have seen is significant tax relief out of that, giving people money back, especially during these times of high inflation, high prices at the pump and everything else. And one thing about business is that everything around it really affects the health of the business environment. And the word environment is important because the state government has a role in creating either a good or a bad environment for business, starting with, like you mentioned, regulations. I think what businesses want is a reasonable, predictable regulatory environment that makes sense, and taxes that are also reasonable and predictable. And what we've seen recently is a lot of what I call scope creep from state agencies kind of operating outside the bounds and the spirit and intent of legislative policy and wishes. And of course, we do have a governor that still holds emergency powers for over 900 days now. And what we need is a state government that is truly and equally represented for the people by their state representatives and senators, and for us to create a business environment that is predictable and that makes sense, and that gives some form of relief during these times of high inflation. And that's something that's really important to me because it affects, the workforce. It affects, the health of our economy here in the 35th district. It's important that, we keep tourism and timber and shellfish industry booming and great, especially in a rural district. We're more economically depressed than other districts along the I-5 corridor. So it's critically important that we have a business environment that works for everyone across the state, and not a patchwork of laws spread across jurisdictions that make things far more complicated.
All right, thank you. So a follow-up to that kind of, and I mentioned that there may be some, repeating yourself, but the follow-up is, what specifically would you support in helping keep costs down? And I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but if you could just, reiterate that a little bit.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, significant tax relief. I think we should cut the sales tax. I think we should have property tax relief as well. And I would like to see, reforms to the B&O tax, which is overly complicated and frustrates a lot of business owners. On top of that, I think we need to rein in, like I was mentioning, we need to rein in state agencies and make them operate within their scope. And I think that could provide some relief as well. And I think we need to take kind of what I call like a doctor's approach, the first do no harm, because the legislature in the middle of various crises, passes laws and regulations that end up doing more harm in a harmful time. And we need to stop doing that. Like, for instance, energy codes, make the building of homes excruciatingly more difficult when we're already like 25% of the permitting cost. of the cost of a project is permitting and it's slow. And we can't be adding more harm into the system. We have to start giving relief and start making things more efficient and move faster in a streamlined way.
Thank you. So next question is, what are the major issues that you see facing Washington State in the next 2 years?
There's a lot of issues on the table that I could talk about, but I think what I really like to say when I'm asked a question like this is the biggest issue we have in our state is our lack of balance in the legislature. We have, in my opinion, flowed so heavily to one side of the political spectrum, and that side of the spectrum has stopped listening to the voters and the people on the experts and the people on the ground. So we have a crisis of balance. And for example, we haven't had a Republican governor since before I was alive. And that might be aging myself a bit, but at the same time, when government is more balanced, you get better legislation, you get better laws. That flows into many things like public safety and business and the environment and a whole host of other things. And so what I really think our biggest issue is to try to find and strike that balance and try to get us back to a place where we are serving the people of Washington instead of radical political ideologies.
What are the major issues you see facing Washington State in the next 2 years?
Well, we have, I think we have a challenge of how we're going to deal with the growth that we're experiencing, that we will continue to experience in the years to come. We're a very desirable place to live. We have, of course, our incredible natural beauty that surrounds us and our forests and our waterways. But we also have a really dynamic, in fact, world-class economy in the state of Washington. And we need to figure out how we're going to get now to this next level with our economy and our quality of life. And that means we need to think really intelligently about the next wave of growth that we're starting to experience. I know in Kitsap County, when I talk to folks there, they love where they live, but they can see how there's this challenge with growth where our infrastructure maybe isn't keeping up with the amount of traffic we're seeing on our highways, the growth in our school age populations. You know, I was talking to some folks that live in the area. It's not really South Kitsap, but it's up more toward Silverdale, and how you've got big housing developments coming in, and yet you still got that same 2-lane road that's already bearing a really heavy amount of traffic, and there's no real planning for how that additional 500 residents are going to get around. That was, again, something that Senator Sheldon was really important about, recognizing the incredible value of thinking about transportation and how that's going to affect our region, because it takes so long to get those projects through the pipeline. We have this amazing opportunity now with the Inflation Reduction Act to get some of this incredibly important infrastructure figured out in South Kitsap and Mason counties, as well as Thurston. We need to be ready for that. So that's a big challenge, and it does involve looking at things like our tax structures, how we're prioritizing roads and connections. You know, yeah, we want to go to electric vehicles at some point, but we're still going to need roads, and we've got to get that stuff figured out, whether it's I-5 congestion, whether it's more support for our ferry system. You know, there's just a lot of huge opportunity and a lot of huge risk if we don't take the time to get this stuff right.
All right, so that some of those things that you touched on kind of dovetail into the next question, and it kind of deals with infrastructure, but specifically, how do you feel Washington State is setting itself up for success when it comes to increasing energy costs and the shift away from fossil fuels? The demand for electricity is going to increase rapidly. Washington State supports the removal of dams off the Snake River. How will Washington compensate for this loss of power supply while demanding the increase for electricity and the electricity dependence?
That's really, as you say, it's really part of this big challenge we now face is this transition. We know we need to transition to clean energy, but how we do it is really important. And if it's done correctly, with support for our business, with support for workers, with support for rural areas, it's going to benefit our economy. But I really believe we have to be careful not to ignore the incredible importance of natural gas and hydropower in that transition as a bridge to greenhouse gas reduction. So that means proceeding very carefully and prudently with the transition, knowing that that's where we're going, but taking care that there isn't this disproportionate burden placed on local business and local workers to make that transition.
How is Washington State setting itself up for success when it comes to increasing energy costs and the shift away from fossil fuels? The demand for electricity is going to increase rapidly. Washington State supports the removal of dams on the Snake River, although the governor and Senator, I think, Murray have come back out and said that that's not practical right now. But that's a position that they support. How will Washington compensate for the loss of power while also demanding an increase in electricity dependence? That's a big question.
Yeah, it is, and it's a really important question, especially as we're facing like no more registered gas-powered vehicles after 2030. Normal people, they scratch their heads at stuff like this, and we don't even have the infrastructure to do something like that. But we set, as a legislature and state agencies, we set these goals, and no more natural gas is another thing, or we're going to demand that we have the loftiest conservation energy codes in all of the nation for building homes during an affordable housing crisis. And like I said before, we got to stop doing more harm to ourselves, but at the same time, provide some relief in some of these areas so we can get our economy and everything moving again. But yeah, I obviously don't support tearing apart the Snake River Dam. We have fish ladders literally designed by our state universities that the state government helped fund and pay for things like that to help with the salmon and everything else. But as energy costs go up, it's just going to hurt all the people at the bottom who are already suffering through inflationary times and high taxes. And I want families in my district and across Washington to be able to provide for themselves. And the dream of home ownership has never been less attainable in Washington State than it is right now. And it's really tough. And people are going to suffer for, what I think is kind of a radical move towards climate change policy. And honestly, I don't know how people are going to afford those prices. I think hydroelectricity is one of our most renewable sources of energy, but we don't consider it renewable. And if we did, it would be for the betterment of all of Washington. And so we're going the wrong direction, and we need to have more balance in our state government to make the wise decisions about where we should be with our energy policy.
Should Washington State be more concerned about controlling its spending and relying less on tax increases to pay for government?
Yes. Simply put, yes. Like I mentioned, we had during a pandemic, businesses were closing down, but we still had an enormous record level surplus. and we'll get it again because it rolls around every biennium. We haven't changed the taxing structure. But people in the the majority party in the legislature right now, wants income taxes and a capital gains income tax that they recently passed. And because there's never a tax dollar that they wouldn't want to spend on something. For instance, we have 1 million commuters on ferries, especially in Kitsap County, but we don't have all the boats running because we fired all the mariners, and now it's harder for people to get to work and get back home again. And we had one ferry already crash, and so but they didn't fix the overlying problem of how the ferry system works and how we retain people there. They just wanted to go build some new green ferries. And that doesn't help our immediate problem. So I'm as a candidate and as even a voter and a taxpayer, I'm frustrated with the lack of ability to fix what we already have before we start moving on to something that is way out there.
So you kind of addressed the income side of the picture for the state, how we just continue to tax and all. So kind of a follow-up for this would be, what can state government do to better control its spending on the spending side of things? Or what should the state be doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, with budgets how they are, and ultimately it's a philosophical thing. Should government be paying for everything? Should government be providing everything? And if in my philosophy the answer is no. I think that a smaller government is the one that governs best, and that the more money you can leave in everyone's pockets so they can enjoy the fruits of their labor is for the betterment of both of our economy and for them as an individual. And so it really boils down to that. What should government pay for? And I've always stuck to the fact that we should do what we're constitutionally prescribed to do, and help people that need assistance, whether they be disabled or elderly or whatever. We're a society that wants to help people when they can't help themselves, and then pay for critical infrastructure that all of us need to use and share. But there is a lot of extra on top of that. Like, look at the mental health crisis that we have going on right now. We spend $1 billion plus, it seems, every year, and we get nothing in return for it. The problem is not being fixed because there's a serious lack of accountability in government when it comes to funding things and money. And that's accountability we desperately need in our state government right now.
Question has to do with, should the state going forward maybe be more concerned about controlling its spending and relying less on increasing taxes to pay for government? And then kind of as a follow-up for that, what can the state government do to better control its spending?
Yes, I agree. I know there's been this incredible scaling up of the state budget over the last decade, and there are multiple needs we all can identify. Needs in infrastructure, which is so incredibly expensive. We know our school system needs to be maintained and supported because these are the building blocks for prosperity. I mean, if we don't have good roads and good schools and good transportation links, business is not going to do well. And if business doesn't do well, none of us do well. So yeah, we have to be thoughtful about these things. We have to make sure everybody's going to pay their fair share. But I think that's the big challenge, isn't it, Matt, to really be in government and be making sustainable, wise choices. The reality is that, yeah, we're having relatively flush times right now in our state, coming out of the pandemic in much stronger position than we imagined we would. And yet we know that we've lived long enough. We see there will be a downturn, and we need to be ready for that. And we need to not be completely overextended in our spending in order to be able to prepare prudently for who knows what that comes ahead.
This question is not necessarily directly related to business, but it does play an important role in business and in the and the community. And this question deals with homelessness and affordable housing. What role could the state play in addressing homelessness and affordable housing in our state?
This is part of what I was thinking to your earlier question about big challenges that face us. And I think especially in our part of Washington State, affordable housing is so critical. And we're actually seeing now in our crisis, we are experiencing a housing crisis. And you and I were both talking about our kids and how we want to have our kids have the same opportunities to buy a home that we had, and yet they don't because in terms of percentage of income and a lot of other factors, the housing supply just isn't there. We truly do, again, need to look comprehensively at the ways that we block builders or developers from initiating projects that can address this crisis. I think we need to really take a comprehensive look at all housing regulation and make sure that there is a reasonable path to be able to build affordable housing, especially in areas where you have an opportunity to connect folks to ability to walk to school, walk to work, or at least ride a bike or a short, car ride away. We have some in Thurston County, there have been some really good advances made in terms of facilitating these kinds of building projects. And I see, especially in towns like Shelton, where you have really beautiful bones to the town in terms of amenities and infrastructure. And yet with regulation and also some economic challenges there, we haven't really been able to infill. So I think that that's something that the legislature talked about last session, failed to pass legislation, but it's not going to go away in terms of being able to facilitate the development of more affordable housing. Because yes, we have a crisis and we really need to deal with it.
So the next question then deals with two unrelated issues to business, but they are related to business because of the community and everything involved. But homelessness is growing. Affordable housing is constantly an issue. How and what role does the state take? What role could the state take? And what's the best way to address both a combination of homelessness and affordable housing?
Yeah, and I think when I talk to business owners on the campaign trail, I hear a lot about the homelessness issue because especially if you have a brick and mortar and you're kind of like in a downtown area or more urban area, it seems to affect you a lot more, especially when it comes to like retail theft. I think we need to change our laws on retail theft. It's a tough issue because the homeless people that are out there, some of them might be breaking the law to continue their habits, especially if they're mentally ill or if they're on any kind of substance or drugs. But they are somebody's, brother, sister, mother, daughter, and we can't forget that they are human beings. So we do need to help them. And like I was kind of mentioning before, we need to do something real to help them with the money that we're investing into mental health and affordable housing. I mean, that really affects business as well, because the workforce and everyone else, they need to have the ability to, live near where they work and operate their business. And so business, kind of looking at it holistically, almost everything affects it to some degree. And I think that right now we're like short 250,000 houses in Washington State. And like just in Kitsap County, the median home price is somewhere around $600,000. And the median income of someone in Kitsap County is much lower than what it would take to qualify for a loan to buy that house. And so how do you get qualified workforce? Education deals with that as well. I think that in order to build more affordable housing, we need to get smarter about permitting and zoning. And and streamline the system and make it more or less costly, I should say, and start building homes. But right now, the legislature goes the other direction. And on mental health and homelessness, we need to go back on the Blake decision. We can't let hard drugs be legal. The possession of hard drugs. We have to stop that. And we have to have compassion for people, but also as a society, we don't want to, I don't think people want to see their lawmakers just turn the other direction and look the other way when they see a lot of crimes happening from the homeless community. So we have to do something real to clean it up, but also do it compassionately. There is no silver bullet solution for it. There's a lot of different ideas. Not all of them get heard. And it's going to be a heavy lift, and it's probably going to be really expensive. But what we need to do is have a framework of accountability for the dollars that the state pumps into mental health and housing for homeless people, especially because right now there really isn't a whole lot of accountability. And I will say that Kitsap actually does it much better than a lot of other counties. So there is something to build off there, but we need to connect people to the right services to get them the help that they need. And if they refuse help, then we need to start going the other direction of possibly jail if they're breaking the law to maintain their habits.
Is probably one of the most important question is, why should we vote for you?
Yeah, that is one of the most important questions. And I think you should vote for me because I've spent over a decade being involved in state legislative politics, cutting my teeth in it. Career-wise, I lead a program, I lead people, and I have to find ways to drive towards consensus and lead diverse teams. And I think that what sets me apart from a lot of other candidates is that I work really hard. I am constantly out at the doors, out on the ground. I want to hear what you have to say. I don't think it's my way or the highway. I want to have the people in my district and even regionally to have a voice and to have an open door policy with me, and so that we can do things that are real for Washington that can actually move the needle in a positive direction.
Why should the people of the 35th Legislative District vote for Sandy Kaiser as their next state representative?
Thank you for that, and thanks for the opportunity to chat with you today. I offer a vision of common sense, get it done, practicality. As I mentioned, I am a Democrat. If elected, I will caucus with the majority party, and I will be able to ensure that our interests are at the table, whether it's in a budget conversation, whether it's in conversations about how we're going to build more affordable housing, whether it's in conversations about which transportation projects get funded. I can represent this district effectively in those conversations. It's a wonderful honor to run. I'm a first-time seeker of office, and it has been such an honor to meet with the small businesses, the big businesses, the tribes, community organizations that thrive across our region. And I know that I will be able to help our communities enter the next amazing periods of their growth and existence and get us set up for future success. And so it would be an honor to represent you in the legislature, and I hope to earn your vote.
So thank you, Sandy. Thank you for taking time out this morning to visit with me. And well, as of this date right now, we're about 2 months away from ballots being of the election on November 8th. Ballots should drop probably the middle of October, somewhere in that timeline. I recommend everybody gets their ballots, vote, get them back in as soon as you can. If you send your ballots back in right away, you don't get as much political mail either.